Rain fell steadily that evening, drumming against the asphalt like a sinister metronome. I remember walking out of the office, briefcase in hand, expecting the usual mixture of relief and satisfaction after a long week. I had just completed the project that would define my career, the one I had spent months perfecting. It wasn't just a promotion, it was validation, recognition for every sleepless night and sacrifice I had made. Then the message came. Check your email, urgent. I didn't hesitate. My phone unlocked with a swipe, and the email opened before I even fully registered the subject line. Project proposal approval submitted by Mark Henderson. My heart sank. My stomach knotted. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Every graph, every analysis, every word I had painstakingly written was there, but it wasn't under my name. It was under his. Mark, my closest friend, the one person I had trusted beyond reason, the one that I had shared my ideas with in confidence. I read it again, hoping that my eyes were lying to me, but they weren't. The betrayal was complete. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I simply sat on the curb outside the office, rain soaking through my coat, staring at the puddles reflecting neon lights. My world had shifted. The air felt heavier, as if the betrayal had physically pressed down on me. I tried to understand it. Maybe it was an accident, a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. The way he had smiled at me just 2 days ago, congratulating me on the progress, had been rehearsed. He had planned this. For hours, I sat there, letting the cold rain wash over me, letting the betrayal sink in. Anger began to build, but it was accompanied by something more precise, more deliberate, a sense of strategy. I realized then that I couldn't fight him the way most people would. I couldn't confront him immediately. It would be reckless, impulsive. And Mark thrived on impulsivity. I needed patience. I needed planning. I needed time. The days after the betrayal were a blur. I went through the motions at work, pretending nothing had happened. My colleagues offered sympathy, but their words were hollow. They didn't know the depth of what had been taken from me, nor did they care to see it. Mark, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had happened. His laughter echoed in the hallways. His confidence was unbearable to watch, a constant reminder of what he had stolen. Every smile he gave, every casual remark, fueled the storm inside me. I made a choice. Not to retaliate immediately, not to cry over what was lost, but to wait, to watch, to prepare. I began to disappear from his life. I declined invitations, stopped answering calls, deleted my social media. He asked a few questions, and I gave vague answers, carefully avoiding suspicion. He thought I had simply moved on. He was wrong. I started observing him from afar, learning his routines, noting every small weakness. I began to understand the subtleties of his life, the friends he trusted, the colleagues who admired him blindly, the habits that made him predictable. Every detail was important. Every small piece of information was ammunition. Then I began the small games. Nothing overt, nothing traceable, a missed document here, a misdirected email there, subtle enough that he would think it was coincidence, but noticeable enough to create doubt. A tiny ripple in his otherwise controlled life. I watched as the first seeds of unease took root. His brow furrowed at minor errors. He muttered under his breath when projects failed inexplicably. I could see it, my influence growing quietly, invisibly, and I loved it. Years passed. Life moved on for everyone else. Mark climbed higher, flaunting his successes. People admired him, trusted him, but they didn't see what I saw. The cracks beneath the surface, the arrogance, the complacency, the ignorance of the storm that was coming for him. I disappeared from his world almost completely. I moved cities, changed jobs, even changed my appearance slightly. No one could trace me. I became a shadow, a ghost, and from that shadow, I observed, I waited, and I planned. And in the quiet moments, late at night, when the city was asleep and the rain tapped gently against my window, I smiled. I had all the time in the world, years if necessary, because patience was my weapon and vengeance my destiny. The weeks after the betrayal felt like walking through a fog. Life moved forward around me, but I was trapped in a different rhythm, a slow pulse of rage and calculation that no one could see. I went to work, ate meals, and pretended to sleep at night, but every action was mechanical. I was alive, but only barely, like a shadow of my former self.
Mark's laughter continued to echo in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see him smiling that smug, self-satisfied grin. He had won, or so he thought. And that belief, that arrogance, was what I intended to destroy. I tried to convince myself to move on. Friends offered comfort, colleagues gave sympathetic smiles, but no words could soothe the raw ache of betrayal. They didn't understand. They couldn't. It wasn't just the stolen project or the ruined promotion, it was the violation of trust, the theft of my identity in the form of ideas that I had created and nurtured. And so, I made a decision. I would disappear. I would vanish from Mark's world, not as a defeated victim, but as a shadow he could never shake. I packed my belongings quietly, sold my apartment, and left the city without a trace. I changed my phone number, created new email addresses, and severed every tie that could link me to my past life. I moved to a smaller town, a quiet place, where no one knew me. I took a job in a mundane office under a different name and built a routine that was dull on the surface, but purposeful beneath. Purposeful because it allowed me to study, to plan, to gather intelligence on Mark. I followed his life from afar. His social media posts, the occasional news articles, mutual acquaintances, everything became data. I learned his routines, his friends, his habits. The more I observed, the more I realized how predictable he was, how fragile his arrogance made him. In the quiet evenings, I began experimenting with subtle manipulations. I started small, sending anonymous messages to create confusion, misplacing documents, orchestrating tiny failures in his work that seemed accidental. Each time he stumbled, I watched from a distance, invisible, savoring the moment. The first time I saw him frown over a project he couldn't control, a small spark of satisfaction ignited inside me. Time became my ally. Years stretched out before me, and I used them to become patient, disciplined, and meticulous. I studied his weaknesses, not just professionally, but personally. I learned the people he trusted blindly, the fears he never admitted, the insecurities he buried beneath layers of charm and arrogance. Every piece of knowledge was ammunition. Every detail was a thread I could pull. Mark's life flourished, seemingly untouched by my absence, but cracks began to appear. Small frustrations, moments of inexplicable doubt, the occasional slip in judgment. I orchestrated them carefully, subtly, making sure nothing could ever be traced back to me. I was invisible, untouchable, the silent hand guiding his unraveling. And all the while, I waited. Years passed. I became a phantom in his life, always watching, always learning, always planning. The slow burn of revenge became an obsession, consuming every thought, every idle moment, every quiet night. I trained myself physically, mentally, emotionally. I read books on psychology, manipulation, strategy. I honed my ability to remain unseen, to slip through cracks unnoticed, to influence without detection. I became someone unrecognizable, even to myself. But that was necessary. The person I had been, the trusting, naive version, could never confront Mark. Only the shadow could. Disappearing wasn't enough. I needed to transform. I changed my appearance, my speech, my habits. I traveled, learning to blend into crowds, to observe without being observed, to exist without leaving traces. I learned to manipulate digital footprints, to erase my history, to create false trails. Mark continued living his life as if nothing had happened, unaware that the quiet one he thought forgotten was now a ghost in the shadows, moving among the threads of his existence. Every move he made was catalogued, analyzed, and stored in my mind. I knew him better than he knew himself. Over the years, I became a master of observation. Every detail of Mark's life was catalogued. When he left for work, the routes he preferred, the restaurants he frequented, the people he trusted, the secrets he never shared aloud. Even his subtle tics, how he tapped his fingers when nervous, the slight hesitation before he lied, became patterns I memorized. I created spreadsheets, notes, coded files, my own digital web of his life. I learned the passwords to his old accounts, traced connections, and even reached into his inner circle through people who didn't know they were tools. By the time I was done, I knew him better than he knew himself.
It wasn't just about revenge, it was art. A carefully constructed architecture of manipulation. Each thread I pulled could create ripples in his world, unseen but impactful. And I learned to be patient. Every minor disruption, every strange coincidence was a test. How would he react? How far could I push him before he noticed? I began to leave subtle signs, cryptic and untraceable. A note slipped under his door. Remember what you did? A misfiled report that caused him to question a minor decision. A voicemail from a stranger asking an impossible question he didn't understand. Nothing overt, nothing traceable, but enough to make him wonder if he was losing his grip. And the fear began to grow, quiet at first, then gnawing. I could see it in the corners of his mind, the hesitation in his emails, the second-guessing in meetings. It was beautiful, watching him unknowingly unravel. Mark began to sense a presence, not a person, not a shadow, but a feeling, an unease that he couldn't place. He started noticing coincidences, files gone missing, emails sent to the wrong person, moments where he could swear someone had been in his apartment, though the door was locked. I let him spiral. The key was subtlety, a sudden chill when he walked into a room, a flicker of light in his peripheral vision, a door left unlocked, or a misplaced pen. Each small disturbance fed his paranoia without ever revealing my identity. I studied his reactions closely. Fear, I realized, could be cultivated slowly, like planting a seed. First, he would dismiss the events, then irritation, confusion, and finally, panic. Each stage brought him closer to the brink, and I was there to watch, quietly controlling the narrative. I also began manipulating the people around him. Friends he trusted would subtly feed misinformation. Colleagues would hint at mistakes he hadn't made. I became a ghost, influencing his reality from every angle. And he had no idea who I was, or that I had ever returned. After years of careful observation and preparation, it was time to escalate. I orchestrated minor accidents, his car breaking down at critical moments, meetings disrupted by mysterious delays, and messages sent to the wrong people at the right time. Each event was calculated to make him feel helpless, uncertain. Mark began to see patterns, though he couldn't identify their source. He started double-checking emails, questioning colleagues, obsessing over details he had once ignored. And all the while, I remained invisible, a phantom in the background. One evening, he was walking home from work. I followed at a discreet distance. A shadow moved near him, fleeting, just enough for him to notice the sensation of being watched. His pace quickened. His head turned sharply, scanning the streets. I smiled from the shadows. The moment was perfect. The tension had reached a point where he was aware of a threat, but powerless to identify it. Each encounter reinforced my control. I didn't need to touch him. I didn't need to confront him directly. Fear itself was my weapon, and it was more effective than anything else I could have done.
Mark's paranoia had grown. He could feel the invisible eyes tracking him, even when the streets were empty. He started noticing patterns, files slightly shifted, misplaced documents, an email appearing from nowhere. He was meticulous, but even meticulous minds falter under sustained pressure. I watched him from the shadows, noting every flinch, every hesitation. The power of knowing him completely was intoxicating. He was walking on a tightrope of uncertainty, and every day I nudged him slightly further towards collapse. One night, I orchestrated a small but convincing scare. A figure appeared at the window of his apartment, just a shadow. No sound, no movement, yet enough to make him glance over his shoulder a dozen times before finally locking the door behind him. Later, when he told a friend about it, he sounded ridiculous, desperate even. But I knew the truth. Fear had taken root. I didn't act overtly. My method was patience. Every misstep he took, every moment of doubt, brought me closer to the ultimate confrontation. He didn't know who I was, but he could feel me, and that, more than anything, delighted me. The years of preparation had led to this, a single, perfect opportunity. I had learned his patterns, his vulnerabilities, and the precise moment when he would be most exposed. I orchestrated events so that he would be alone, confident, and completely unaware that the quiet one he had betrayed was already there, waiting. It began subtly, a misdelivered message, a friend subtly misinforming him about his schedule, a delayed call that forced him into isolation. The trap was perfect, and I was ready. I approached him one rainy evening, the same kind of rain that had witnessed the first moment of betrayal years ago. My footsteps were silent on the wet pavement. My coat clung to me, dark and unremarkable. And then I saw him, oblivious, walking towards the fate he had ignored for too long. "Mark," I said, my voice calm but deliberate. He froze. Recognition came slowly, painfully. His eyes widened. Fear replaced arrogance in an instant. "You," he stammered. "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "It's me. Do you remember who I am?" The confrontation wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Every little manipulation, every cryptic note, every small failure I had orchestrated over the years flashed through his mind.
He realized that every ripple in his life that had driven him crazy was mine. Every shadow, every whisper, every doubt had been my doing. I saw him crumble, and I let him. The final confrontation was inevitable. I cornered him, not with violence, but with truth. His arrogance, his trust in his own intelligence had been his undoing. He had underestimated the quiet one, the friend he had betrayed. "You destroyed everything I had," I said. "You thought I would disappear, that I would vanish and forget. But I waited. I watched. I planned. And now you see me coming." Tears, fear, and anger battled in his eyes. He had nothing left to hide behind. No charm, no lies, no defenses. I had stripped him bare through years of calculated manipulation. I didn't need to strike physically. The destruction I had wrought was already complete. His mind was fractured, his confidence shattered. His life, once carefully controlled, was now mine to command. And in that moment, I understood something deeper. Revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance. Years of patience, planning, and strategy had restored equilibrium. I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the wreckage. His cries didn't reach me.
They weren't necessary. The lesson had been delivered. I disappeared again, as silently as I had returned. Mark was left to pick up the pieces of his life, a life now shadowed by fear and uncertainty. Some people never recover from betrayal. Some never forgive themselves for ignoring the quiet ones they wronged. I too had changed. Revenge had demanded transformation, patience, and obsession. I was no longer the person I had been, trusting, naive, hopeful. I had become a shadow, a whisper, a calculated force that existed just beyond perception. And yet I felt satisfaction, quiet, profound, unshakable. The betrayal that had once left me shattered now served as the foundation for my patience, strategy, and ultimate triumph. Years later, if Mark ever recalled that night, he would feel a chill in his spine, a whisper in the back of his mind, the silent reminder of the one who had waited. He had seen me coming, yes, and he had learned too late that patience is a weapon and revenge a masterful art. I walked away into the darkness, unseen, untraceable, untouchable. The storm I had carried inside for so long finally settled, leaving only quiet satisfaction in its wake. And somewhere in the depths of his fractured mind, he would never forget the quiet one who waited. I waited for years, and he finally saw me coming, is a chilling tale of betrayal, patience, and revenge. Watch as a quiet, underestimated individual meticulously plots payback against the friend who betrayed them. This suspenseful psychological thriller will keep you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe to Polygon of Lies for more dark, true-to-life horror, mystery, and suspense stories that reveal the hidden truths behind human actions. If you found this story gripping, remember, never underestimate patience and the quiet ones around you. They may be watching, waiting, planning.
For more chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts, subscribe to Polygon of Lies and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were in this situation? Your story might inspire our next video.